begin with that. Bridget asked about the regulatory status of idebenone. Most of the people in the room know that idebenone for some time has been available online as a, for lack of a better term, dietary supplement. Over the last year, the FDA inspectors have challenged that. They've gone to some of the distributors of idebenone, not to inspect their idebenone, but to inspect other things. They found violations in other areas of completely unrelated compounds. And while they were there, they found idebenone being encapsulated. It wasn't being produced, it was being encapsulated and then sent to distributors from whom we have often gotten idebenone. When they found that idebenone and tested it and confirmed it was idebenone, they made the statement and issued a mild warning that idebenone could not be considered as a dietary supplement because, and they went back to the statement they made and issued in 2003 when a company filed for approval of idebenone as a dietary supplement. The FDA ruled at that time that it could not be considered a dietary supplement because it had not been made available as a dietary supplement prior to the time that it was authorized for clinical trial in humans to treat various conditions, including FA. So, and they quoted the legislation of Senators Harkin and Hatch in October of 1994 called the Dietary Supplement Health and Education Act of 1994 that defined dietary supplements. And one of the definitions was, it could not be considered a dietary supplement unless it was made available as a dietary supplement prior to the time that the FDA gave authorization to conduct clinical trials in humans of that compound. So basically the FDA has declared that idebenone is a drug, not a dietary supplement. We have spent a lot of time trying to turn that statement around. We've gone to meetings with the staffs of Senator Harkin and Senator Hatch with the intention of trying to get them to, as they revise the definitions, as they're about to do, and the guidelines for FDA inspectors, to give us a hook on which to hang idebenone as a dietary supplement. And they've given us their considered opinion. As much as they'd like to help, they will not be able to convince the FDA to reverse their ruling of 2003 and consider idebenone a dietary supplement rather than a drug. What we don't know is how energetic the FDA will be in enforcing that ruling. In other words, it was purely by accident, it appears to us, that they found idebenone in this capping company while they were looking for violations of other stuff. So we don't know how much energy they will devote to enforcing that ruling. At the same time, we are exploring the opposite alternative, which is to try to get idebenone approved as a drug. We all know that we've been through a couple of phase 3s in FA. It's been tried in Duchenne muscular dystrophy. They're about to enter a phase 3 in Duchenne. They've been in MELAS. They've been in Leber's hereditary optic neuropathy. And none of these, idebenone is not approved for any condition. So we're looking at the possibility we could get, with the cooperation of drug companies like Santhera, see if we could collect all those data from all those trials and show, safety and some efficacy signal. It's a very long pole in the tent, as you can imagine. This is not, I'll have to say to you, not very likely, but we'll not rest until we've turned over every stone. In the meantime, thank goodness we've got 743 to look forward to. I think you've heard from our best scientists today and clinicians that something like 743 could be a whole lot more beneficial for our patients than than it is idebenone. And it's incumbent upon all of us to make sure this next trial and the other trials of other antioxidants go well and quickly, and will never fail because of lack of participation, which is what causes failure of most drug trials. So we cannot afford to let that happen to us. It's never happened because of the people in this room. We've always been able to recruit our trials in a heartbeat, and we want to keep doing that until we get those approvals that will make this regulatory issue go away for forever. So I hope that answers the question. I could go on.
I think
it
probably does. So find us another question.
Okay. Other questions? Ms. Pam.
Getting your exercise. Along those lines, I just wonder if you wanted to take CoQ10, what dose would you take it at, and how many times a day would you take it, and how is it equivalent to?
You want that one, Jima?
I mean, I can tell about indirect experience with other diseases. There were clinical trials done, for example, for Parkinson's disease. There were clinical trials done for Huntington disease. Again, the results were a little controversial. There is at least one publication that shows beneficial effects for Parkinson's disease at very high doses. And if tolerated, and correct me, Dave, if I'm wrong, I think if tolerated from a gastrointestinal point of view, the more the better. I think the bioavailability is very low, so you have to eat a lot of it in order to get reasonable concentration in your organs. And that's the problem with all of these compounds. Coenzyme Q in particular, though, the old version of it.
So 600?
Yeah,
Oh,
that's
more,
exactly
like
correct.
2,000 or more per day, milligram per day. So like 2 grams per day, I would say. I think that the doses, if I remember correctly, for the Parkinson's study, which was a little prolonged, it was 2,000, yes.
Yeah.
So high doses.
And it is tolerated, we know, up to 3,000 milligrams per day. Whether you get better absorption, and that's the problem with the debenone, is once you go off 35 milligrams per kilogram, you don't clearly get better absorption. We don't know the bioequivalence. No one's done. That's the problem with coenzyme Q, is no one's ever done a dose-finding trial with FA to figure out how much the maximum dose would be. At some point, there is that one known side effect of coenzyme Q, financial. So that the more you take, the more expensive it gets, obviously. Where that trade-off point is, no one knows. It is certainly safe up to 3,000 milligrams. That's been shown in a different disorder. My personal advice, if I were advising anyone, as I probably will be doing in the tangible future, is somewhere greater, is 800 or greater, less than 4,000. But after that, you think we'd have to see exactly what price it's trading at this week.
But would you?
And the other thing, more than anything, is take it with food, because if you do not take it with food, preferentially a fatty meal like that consumed at McDonald's or something like that, if you take it with fatty food, you get much, 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 much better absorption. That's something which was not recognized when most of the data on bioavailability of coenzyme Q was done. So I don't think anyone's ever gone back and done the study again.
And would you take it like 3 times a day like you do the idebenone, or is it?
I think it's purely a cumulative dose and the amount that you can actually take with a meal.
Yeah. Maybe you answered this earlier, but is it's the drug that you were talking about in University of Florida, 743, I think? Is that right?
Yeah.
Are we going to be going to Florida to do those trials, or is it going to be at CHOP? And I thought it said at the end of this year. It's
okay.
No, you know.
So the question is EPI 743, which if you view idebenone as a second-generation coenzyme Q, EPI 743 and EPI 0001 are third-generation coenzyme Qs or second-generation idebenone genetics. What Dr. Miller announced in that symposium and has said is that they will be doing a follow-on study of EPI 743 and Friedreich ataxia. It's meant to be pivotal. That is, if done successfully, would lead to approval. It's would be 3 sites, the lead site at the University of South Florida. The other 2 sites planned are UCLA and Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. He has intimated to some individuals that would start in December, but that will vary depending on when IRBs approve this and the exact final form of the protocol.
Okay, so we don't know if it will be January or December.
Excuse me? We don't know if it will
really
be
know when
January,
it will be?
December, or November, or February, or March, or April, or tomorrow. Okay. I'm in clinic tomorrow. It won't be tomorrow.
Okay, so I just wanted to know what they meant by end of the year, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay.
Other questions?
Jean.
Thanks. Dr. Linton, I'm so bad at microphones, but I thought you alluded to something about exercise and mitochondria. And
Yes.
I don't know if I missed it or.
The question is about exercise and is it beneficial? We've always thought that it's beneficial. We've always thought it had specific improvements. One of the things that's been suggested, I know by the group at University of Miami, I think Giovanni may know this literature better, is it actually increases level of PGC1 alpha, which is the thing that Rob talked about as being paradoxically down in people with FA.
No, so that's correct. So exercise is one of the factors that definitely, exercise and starvation, of course we want to avoid the latter, but exercise does increase the level of PGC1 alpha in skeletal muscle, so your muscle. Now, it seems to me, however, that in Friedreich ataxia, surprisingly to some extent, muscle is not all that affected. So I don't think there is any evidence right now that this phenomenon applies to other cell types. There are other stimulators, for example, being exposed to cold will increase PGC1 alpha in a particular type of fat tissue to make more heat. But then again, that does not apply. So if we think about heart and neurons, which are maybe at this point our targets, I don't know that there is any evidence that exercise would do anything to those.
Yeah. That said, that question of how to answer the question of is muscle involved in FA, it is not degeneratively involved in the same sense that it would be in Duchenne's muscular dystrophy or muscular dystrophy. It is, however, involved in a metabolic level, as shown several times by different forms of muscle spectroscopy, including that done in that very ancient building at the University of Pennsylvania where we had the treadmill with the mice. Not a lens for mice. Tom traveled for that one as well, which maybe he got his initial travel habits. In any case, so muscle is involved, and I think that's PGC1 alpha is an explanation, but I think we use it to explain the clinical phenomena which we observe in everyone that people who exercise do better.
Thanks.
Go ahead, Jean.
Other questions?
Oh, yeah.
It's been 10 minutes and now Norm hasn't yet had a
Is
question.
this a rebuttal to Deborah's comments, or?
No, it actually goes back to the same old question. If your genes, your DNA has the same number of repeats throughout your life, it's progressive. Now, I understand the long track from the cerebellum down to the legs, and you lose your ability and you're into a wheelchair. But what I don't understand is the process of how the body's developing. There must be an aging component to it. And the reason I'm asking is I'm outside the box thinking about our treatments and therapies, and something is antagonizing it to get worse over time. If not, the body should hit homeostasis and just maintain certain level of frataxin in some type of attack, right? That's fairly convoluted, isn't it?
Well, I can take a stab at this. So if you think about cells that are able to replicate and cells that are not, typically the last ones, the latter, the cells that are not able to replicate are the ones that degenerate, not just in Friedreich ataxia. This is true for basically every neurodegenerative disease. It's true for mostly also for muscular, like Duchenne muscular dystrophy. You're born without dystrophin, but it takes years before you see the death of the muscle. I mean, you would see it if you took a muscle biopsy, but you wouldn't see it clinically immediately. And I think this is due to the fact that as you said, cells try to reach homeostasis. They defend themselves. Right. And they can only do it up to a certain point. And then I think first step is a functional decline. And I'm saying this now because I was thinking about the data that you presented today, a 28 days trial with an improvement in a rating scale which addresses the function of neurons for the most part. It would not be, you would not expect those neurons to be regrown or regenerated. There's no way. All you can, and it's too short a time to see the effect on preventing death of neurons. So the only explanation, as hoping that the data are confirmed, is that actually you have improved the function of those neurons temporarily. So I think you're improving their ability to defend themselves for a period of time. But then, again, the damage accumulates, and this is true for all neurodegenerative diseases. You know, a lot of these the neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's disease are caused by accumulation of bad misfolded proteins. The cell works very hard to get rid of these proteins. Eventually, maybe after many, many years in some cases, they fail.
So basically the human body has non-replicating cells that they've had since birth, and when those get used up and abused, and...
Well, so then humans don't have a lot of replicating power in their brain. There are, I mean, we know recently that there are stem cells in the brain as well, and there is a little bit of regeneration. Is not sufficient, I would say, to repair this kind of damage, as far as we know. Muscle has a little bit more. If you have an acute muscle injury, then usually that can be repaired. The brain, no, unfortunately, not really.
You would not necessarily grow. I think Giovanni is exactly correct. The improvement one sees with A0001 and stuff like that, given that it is real, represents improvement in those cells that are not dead yet. Now, will it actually keep them alive forever? Or will you eventually your cells modify to adapt and then go on to start declining again? And so what rate do they decline at? We don't know those questions. Let's just find it out. Now, if one did biochemically stop everything in the brain right now, what would happen? That's another good question no one knows. But while the brain does not really functionally replicate cells, it does remodel. We all have pathways present in our brain right now which are silent. They're there, they're destined to be used if you should need to use them. So how much of that is already had been kicked into gear in a person with Friedreich ataxia or any neurodegenerative disorder, and we don't know the answer to that. In those individuals, there are various examples of this, Christopher Reeve being one example. He did not regenerate anything, but through exercise and physical therapy, he remodeled his nervous system following his one-time event. So there are pathways there that in most cases can be remodeled. We do not have any clue of the extent.
Thank you.
Would there be any nutritional guidance, such as protein versus fruits, vegetables, even vitamins?
I think the smartest thing is don't eat what I eat. That's probably the best.
Definitely do not consume that amount of caffeine.
FA is a metabolic disorder. It's in mitochondrial function. Dr. Miller likes to say that. He's been saying it for years. Theoretically, there should be dietary approaches. However, we understand the metabolism, and this gets to that very complicated slide that I had. We understand the metabolic deficiencies so poorly that we could not intelligently advise a person right now on what to pursue. People have gone on their own idiosyncratic diets, and I think I've seen some people get better and some get worse, and was it related to the diet, or was it not? Welcome to the variability of human disease. I think hopefully with some of the spectroscopy experiments we're doing, we'll be able to come up with dietary conceptions of what might be a better diet. That would be useful in forestalling things, but would not likely get to the curative word.
Can I do a quick follow-up? In our case, right here, I guess I'm particularly wondering about, in our case, I envision eating proteins, drinking dairy, and that's problematic for our child. Is that necessarily something to push, as in?
I think a good balanced diet is what we would say right now. I had two things. We have reported in various areas that, in fact, people with FA tend to have a very low body mass index. In fact, they're quite thin with body mass indexes of the 10th percentile. We've heard from many parents and many individuals around this room. It's not related to what we feed them. They seem to eat and they have a good appetite, but they just do not gain weight. It is part of the metabolism of the disease. I will note that has an effect on how your echocardiogram should be read, which might be part of the variability there. So encourage a healthy diet. Whatever they'll eat is better than what they won't eat. I would also, though, and this is relevant to the question of placebo, which I had earlier, one difference between the phase 2 and the phase 3 idebenone trial is in between those events is when we discovered that idebenone was much better absorbed with fatty foods. The placebo group in our trial was encouraged to eat fatty foods because everyone was, or that was much less prominent in the NIH trial. Is that the reason the placebo group did better in ours? Did eating fat make you better? I don't know. That's one of the issues which comes up in clinical trials is when you enroll in a clinical trial, we change everything. We change your lifestyle for those 6 months that you're there, and we don't know how they affect you. Did I really say that fatty foods make you better? No, I didn't. I said we don't know for sure what these are, and I can't counsel people to go down a certain path until we know exactly that after it's been investigated.
Getting back to like trials, you know, the FDA, I know with the idebenone 3, you know, it was the thickening of the heart walls, and you famously are saying, you know, yeah, but the FDA is saying, yeah, does that improve quality of life? What does it really do? I mean, at A0001, you were looking at one biomarker which didn't work out, but all of a sudden neurologically they're doing way better, which is unusual in a trial. I know that was unusual to see that kind of difference. So with no cure and no treatment right now to slow it, you know, if we're looking at a disease that's a long-term, progressive, over time, where you might not see that kind of A0001 effect, and you're looking maybe at something to slow the disease, especially in someone who is asymptomatic but has FA, maybe a younger sibling, so you've done the testing. What kind of biomarker can you have, other than the increase in frataxin, to prove to the FDA that something may work over time to slow down the progression of the disease and maybe delay onset of symptoms that will satisfy the FDA?
I think at a FARA strategy meeting several months ago, 3 people were elected to consider exactly what biomarkers we would use in pre-symptomatic individuals. So with my 2 compatriots here who are also elected to do that, that's a very good question.
Yeah. Gretchen, all I can tell you is that exact question is posted, literally posted on the wall in my office. It's a priority. We've got to try and figure out the answer to that question.
I would note one thing. It will go to something which Jim Rushi encouraged today and Norm encouraged. Yes, I'm encouraging you, Norm. Alternative drug designs, alternative drug approval designs. There are ways in which blood tests or biomarkers could be used as a conditional approval marker if you highly validate them in advance. You would be expected to follow that after approval and prove that not only did you make that blood test better, or that imaging study like optical coherence tomography better, but if you gave people the drug for a few years, you made them better. That would be required. It's very complicated and requires that thing which I talked about, massive amounts of natural history data.
It just seems to me that to buy people with FA time, before they, you know, to buy them time
Yep.
for you to get that cure, you know, what are you going to show the FDA? Because they seem to be very picky on what they will accept as
The nerve of them. You're exactly right. That's why we look for that biomarker, be it even raising frataxin level in peripheral lymphocytes, which or platelets, which is an unaffected tissue, and then following people over time so that that improvement in a blood test marker was shown to really make people better over the course of the next 5 years and things like. There are diseases in which such paradigms have been approved. And while I mentioned Jim Rushi believes in such paradigms, every time I've come up with one, he's been able to find a logistical hole, so I'm still looking for one.
Some of the measures that we've looked at that aren't blood tests, but measures of function and/or subtle measures of clinical features of the disease are actually ones that the FDA would be interested in: vision, hearing, and speech.
I would also note they might even use a pegboard.
Yeah, and a pegboard. They can tie those things directly to improving quality of life, at least in their paradigm of how one might measure quality of life. So those are just some other things that we're looking at. One way to try and get a glimpse at pre-symptomatic biomarkers might be neuroimaging. Neuroimaging has gotten sophisticated enough, not the standard MRI that you get when you're getting a diagnostic workup, but much more high-level images, functional images. We're looking at now to see if there are any differences there. Again, the FDA wouldn't approve a drug based on neuroimaging, but it at least allows us a tool to look for something in that pre-symptomatic stage and/or measure a change, and then hopefully be able to tie that then back to improvement in clinical symptoms.
It just seems like it would be hard for the FDA to approve something where you show lack of significant progression. You know what I mean?
It's taken me a really long time to wrap my head around that. I honestly, when I started working on this, I thought, slowing progression is awesome. That should be a really good outcome. And I still come back to it, just as you are, and baffled that it doesn't get you what you think it should get you.
And
I'd also know that some of the problem is not on the FDA side. We have talked with pharmaceutical firms who are uncomfortable with the slowed progression concept. They want something to be made better. They want L-DOPA in Parkinson's disease, a purely symptomatic drug, which probably doesn't require a placebo group. If you use that model, you would throw away 99 out of every 100 drugs. So some of it is at the drug company comfort zone.
Next question is from Jason.
It seems the majority of the clinical trials, the age exclusion is 18. If they're under 18, they're not allowed to participate. I have a couple of questions. One, why is it like that? And then also, let's say, moving forward to the FDA, how would that exclusion apply to a drug that passes the FDA?
I'll take a crack at starting that one. I think one issue is just safety and what's known about the drug, and to be able to do trials in children of a true new chemical entity. The amount of toxicology and safety preclinical work you have to do is a whole lot higher in children than it is in adults. So that's one reason. It's purely a practical one in terms of drug development. Most companies that we've talked to, though, it's not that they're not moving forward with a pediatric approach, because they recognize that if the drug were to be approved, half of their market is children. And so it's just that those pediatric studies will come a little bit behind the adult studies, and usually those pediatric toxicology studies, all that stuff is actually getting done once you're in clinical trials with adults. So you'll see the age limit for subsequent studies hopefully start to go down once they've got a proof of concept study that supports the drug.
And I'd add to that, if you look at the idebenone studies, especially the earlier ones, as Jen just said, we started with adults. The first dose at each level would go to adults, and then it would go down to adolescents, and then it would go down to kids. And the final trial, I think it was the phase 2, was 7-year-old to 17, and the phase 3 was 7 to 35, as I recall. So You know, we have had in trials that included kids, but it's always a discussion at the agency, at the FDA, as to how low you can go. And a lot of it, as Jen was saying, it's the preclinical research you've done. Have you tested it in adolescent animals? Have you tested it in infant animals and so forth to set that safety parameter? And has it been in humans before? So.
Yeah.
And next question is here.
We're only about 2.5 months into our FA diagnosis for our 13-year-old daughter, but so we're still trying to figure out medications and supplements. One of the things that our doctors are having trouble helping us figure out is the fact that she was already on some different medications for other stuff before this, ADHD, anxiety, OCD. So she's still using Zoloft and risperidone, but they've taken her off ADHD medicine. So she is just not functioning at school at all. Can't get anything done, school or home, and they just want to kind of put that aside for now, you know, and concentrate on this. But meanwhile, she's having a rough time getting through the day. So I'm wondering how, you know, other medical issues go along with this, how we deal with that.
Yeah, the presence of Friedreich ataxia does not contradict the possibility of other coexistent medical or psychological illnesses. It sounds like your daughter has coexistent ADD, OCD features, which could not be misinterpreted as a feature of FA. It's a separate issue. Those medications you mentioned, be it ADD medicines, risperidone, or Zoloft, have no contraindications in FA as such.
She does have severe hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, so they were concerned about the ADHD meds, and I don't know if I should she's on so many new things. I hate to push to ask for more, but
I would ask them for a specific reason they took away the ADD medicines. In particular, if she's on a classical stimulant, switching over to Concerta or one of the others, which is less blood pressure increasing. I'm presuming that's the aspect of it. Now, because the most important thing you need to do is be sure that she learns and does well in school and all those things, because that helps us all do well in things. So I would wonder specifically about that and ask them, make them have a specific reason related to her ADD medicines that they took them away.
So, Dave, I've got a question for you. It's not really my question as much as it's a community question. I'm getting a lot of stuff through FAPG, and I see a lot on the website of the Rylutech. And I know you and I had a conversation about a month ago, but in this kind of forum, could you kind of give a stance on what you think about that? And I mean, a lot of people it's a lot of anecdotal results out there that people are raving about it. Again, it's not controlled, it's not scientific, but there's a lot of people that are like, oh, I should get on that, I should get on that. And maybe it is good, maybe it's not. You and I talked, and so I know a little bit more, but I'd like for you to share that.
So the question is Rulitech, also known as Rulizol, medicine approved for ALS, so I think I should turf it to Giovanni, but I don't think I can. It was approved, I guess, probably around 1992. It has always had a small but significant beneficial effect in the models of ALS and the exact mechanism.
Not in the models, actually.
It doesn't work in the models. It prolongs life expectancy.
It prolongs life in people by a few months.
Yeah.
A small but significant
Small but
effect.
significant. So I suspect that when it was released in '92, there probably were some FA patients who probably used it off-label at that point because someone could write a prescription. And I note that we didn't hear about it. Of course, our internet systems were much less developed at that time, so maybe it had some benefit and we never heard about it. It's rediscovered a couple years ago in the context of, I believe, a Spanish study in which they took 40 people with ataxia, it's about 40 people with ataxia, all comers, published in what we call the Green Journal of Neurology. Open label, no placebo group. Some people get better significantly with their ataxia, some don't. As I look at that study, the people who didn't get better were, for the most part, people with Friedreich ataxia. That's the best controlled evidence that I know. And again, it's not well controlled because there's no placebo group, and I'm guessing their stage based on their, what we call an ICARS number. So you can't get a very good impression. I was not particularly excited about it. I did thought it showed some promise in other ataxias. A few people have mentioned benefit with FA. I cannot, as you know from chat rooms, I could not tell you whether this is 1 or 2 primary reports and 3 or 4 other passes around. I simply don't know, because I have been asked by probably about 10 people and given the same previous explanation. It does have side effects. You have to follow liver tests with it. You have to do a few things. So it's not an entirely benign medicine. It is almost certainly a symptomatic medicine, which makes, if it does have a benefit, and I put that if there, only makes the symptoms better at this moment. It is pricey. In fact, it's the model for the overpriced small molecule. So that if one wants to get it, it will be between $10,000 and $20,000 per year for your insurance company. So if you are successful, it will either involve a lot of paperwork or a lot of money on one side. At that point, I have offered it to several people with other ataxias. I've offered it to a few people with FA with that explanation on how I'm not convinced, and I would not go on it at the expense of other things. Right now, no one has taken me up on it, having given that explanation. If someone really, one of my patients really wanted to be on it, we could give it a try. If I were to go off-label on something for someone in front of me, I would have I would go other options probably. All other things being equal.
Ron, there's someone behind you.
I have 2 quick questions. I believe it was Dr. Wilson that mentioned kind of in passing resveratrol as a possible frataxin protein building component, and should we begin using that? And if so, forgive my ignorance, but Costco and Sam's, you can buy certain resveratrol juices and supplements and that type thing. Is that something that we should consider? And also, can you give me some other suppliers for idebenone right now? We work with Dr. Perlman out at UCLA, and we get ours through Smart Powders. Are there other suppliers out there that are safe and that people have used?
And before, I'll let Jen and them take this. This will be the last question so we can get everyone to their planes and stuff like that. So Jen, you got this one.
We don't know about resveratrol yet. We funded a small clinical trial in Australia, placebo-controlled study that just concluded, and we're hoping to have the results soon. So I don't want to even try and guess at this point, because I think we'll have some better data in the next month or 2 as they finish closing out the study and getting results to us. But they did specifically look at frataxin levels in patients in the study, in addition to the neurologic measures and that kind of thing. So hopefully we'll know about resveratrol shortly. In terms of idebenone supplies, the other thing is that not all resveratrol is created equal. So there is a lot of variability in what you see at Sam's Club and what you can order over the internet, and some of the resveratrol that we'd select for clinical use.
And if you wish to get it by drinking red wines, please check the bottle.
Consult Ron Bartek.
Yes.
All right.
We had to have Ron a question.
So
the question on where to get idebenone supplies, I'll talk to my coordinators, and we will see if we can get you a list on where things are trading right now, if they are trading.
Yeah, you could go to the FARA website and you'd find a list of about 3 suppliers. I can tell you that they're all nervous right now because of these FDA warning letters. There are supplies available right now. We're just not sure for how much longer that will be the case. So, you know, again, we're doing everything we possibly can and more to try to secure that supply, but we're not absolutely confident it will be possible. We're hoping that the cavalry has mounted with these other compounds that we can get approved. So, and of course, it is available in Canada as Katina, and it is available in Europe over the counter. So there are other sources. So
I want to thank everyone for coming again this year. It's been one of our best ever. Thanks again. Please travel safely home. And if you have questions, please feel free to email or call us at any time.
But before we break up, I'd like to, on behalf of FARA and FA families everywhere, including those here, thank Dave Litch and his clinical team.
Anytime, sir. And we'll see about 11 of you in clinic tomorrow.
And like to also thank all of you for being here. It's the best we've ever had. And thank you, too, for being with us yesterday to support the Ride Ataxia Philadelphia. And one final note especially for those families amongst us who are either newly diagnosed or are at a FARA symposium like this for the first time. I hope you leave this one, and I trust you will, knowing several things. One, you're in very good hands with these wonderful scientists around the world. You heard a lot about their most promising operations and activities. Number two, I hope you now know that you're neither helpless nor hopeless. I like to say we started off, we were hopeless, then we changed that to being hopeful, and now we're confident we're going to get this thing. And finally, that you know now that you're not alone in this. We started off with isolated families, isolated patients around the world, and now we've got not only families working together, we are one big FA family, and we know there's a lot we need to do right now, and working together we will treat and cure this disease and eliminate it in the next generation. So thank you all.